I'm going to be your MC for today. I'm Naneke Japan, and I'm here with
Ni Adote Badu. Yes, so we are here on a very important subject, Pan-Africanism. And over the years, Pan-Africanism has been, the drive for the African continent. However, in the 21st century, there has been a nosedive in the activities and impact of Pan-African activities on the continent. So we are here basically to revitalize the Pan-African spirit and have a better understanding of what to do and how to complement, the 21st century Pan-African race as we have it. So we are here as an institution, all of us, and we have two main institutions supporting this program. That is the Institute of African Studies, who is hosting us nicely, and we will have our acting director welcome us shortly. Then we have the African Studies Association of Africa, that is the ASAA. If you want to learn more about these institutions, you can find them in the brochure. Just the first 2 pages of the brochure can tell you a lot about the Institute of African Studies and the ASAA. We would also like to use this opportunity to acknowledge our sponsors, IAS, Institute of African Studies, ASAA, and then Open Society. All right.
So moving on, we are going to have a welcome address from the Pan-African Conversation Committee. So please let's welcome Mr. Nijan Bosompra.
So, okay, good morning. Ideally, I should just say welcome and then my assignment here will be done, but this is not an ideal situation, so I have a few words to say on behalf of the local organizing committee. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the Pan-African Conversation, which is being co-hosted by the Institute of African Studies, and also the African Studies Association of Africa, and it's been generously sponsored by the Open Society Initiative of West Africa. This conversation, we believe, is a unique platform for activists, researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and stakeholders from across Africa and beyond to exchange ideas and experiences on various topics related to development, governance, and innovation, but in a Pan-African manner. The theme for the Pan-African Conversation, as already outlined by master ceremonist, is revitalizing Pan-Africanism in the 21st century. We have distinguished speakers this morning, both from academia and from civil society, to share their insights and perspectives on issues relating to Pan-Africanism, with more specific focus in the 21st century. We have an exciting and diverse, workshop session that will cover a number of issues. Notably among these include the African Union and their Agenda 2063. We would also pay attention to Africa and her diaspora, women, gender, and Pan-Africanism. We would also look at African free trade and regional integration, as well as reparations and repatriations. We will also have a rich exhibition that will showcase various dimensions and aspects of Pan-Africanism. And at the end of this conversation, it is our hope that it will stimulate fruitful discussions, debates, and also foster collaborations and partnerships that will inspire new ideas and solutions for addressing the complex challenges and opportunities facing Africa today and in the future. It is also our hope that you will enjoy the cultural and social activities that have been prepared for you later this evening, notably the palm wine night that will be held, this evening at the Old Side at the Institute of African Studies. During this, you're going to have the opportunity to enjoy some Pan-African palm wine music, assorted drinks, and so much more. Don't forget to also hit the dancing floor when the music starts rolling. We would like to take this opportunity to thank our host institution, the Institute of African Studies, for providing us with this wonderful venue and facilities. We would also like to thank the African Studies Association of Africa for their collaborative work, and our sponsor, the Open Society Initiative for West Africa, and supporters for their generous contributions and assistance. I would also particularly want to use this opportunity to appreciate the entire Indefatigable Local Organizing Committee for their, I was hoping that you would give it up to them. They've done a lot of work this past 2 months. They've been relentless, they've been reliable, they've been called at all times. They still stood up to the task and ensured that everything is prepared as it is, as we are having it this morning. So we would like to appreciate them for their contributions, their strength, their time that they've devoted to make sure that this happens. And then most importantly, we also want to appreciate you for making it, sorry for the distractions. Want to appreciate you yourself for making the time to be here for us to have this conversation, with the hope that would push Africa to where it's supposed to get to, especially within this 21st century. I wish you a successful and enjoyable conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nijan. That was very, very interesting. Thank you so much. So, we'd like to welcome the acting director of the Institute of African Studies. He's in the person of Dr. Usman Al-Hassan, a senior research fellow here at the Institute of African Studies and a Pan-Africanist at heart. Thank you, sir. Yes, and before the director goes, please, we are having interpretation online for Swahili and for French. So please, all our speakers would urge you to speak slowly. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Institute of African Studies. The director, Professor Samuel Nteusu, is on, a trip to Senegal. Currently, he's in Dakar, and I think that Dakar is one other area where you have a vibrant Pan-Africanism, activities and many things going on. So it's not a bad thing either. And so in his step, and to represent the Institute of African Studies, so I have come to represent the director who is away, but I am also representing my very humble self, the staff of the Institute of African Studies, our graduate students, and then everybody that is associated with this noble cause. So I just read some, small text that we've done on behalf of the director. And I've been introduced already, so I would just go on. So on behalf of the director of the Institute of African Studies, I warmly welcome you to one of the world's renowned centers for African studies. The institute was formally opened in 1963 by no other person than Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the father of Pan-Africanism on the continent, no doubt. So it is indeed befitting that the Institute is hosting such an event like we have today. And what we have today, it's also befitting of the event that is to happen, because it's a conversation which is aptly themed as the continental, within the Pan-African body. In fact, it is what we going to witness today the event is themed Pan-African Conversations, Revitalizing Pan-Africanism in the 21st Century. We dare say that the continental body, that's the African Union, seeks to achieve its flagship program, and I'm sure a lot of us are aware of the Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. It seeks to achieve this within a Pan-African framework, and we must not only interrogate Pan-Africanism, but also stimulate and sustain the Pan-African spirit through events like this. The Institute of African Studies has a long history of featuring Pan-Africanist, thoughts and activities. And it is remarkable to note that on 25th October, when President Nkrumah opened the Institute, I think that was, remind me, was that 1963? Yeah. When he opened the Institute, he tasked fellows and students at the Institute to study the history, culture, and institutions, languages and arts of Ghana and of Africa in new African-centered ways, which means earlier on, our story was being told by somebody else within a particular approach and within some particular perspective. Its entire freedom from the propositions and presuppositions of the colonial epoch and from the distortions of those professors and lecturers who continue to make European studies of Africa the basis of this new assessment. And indeed, he did also say that our study here about Africa was not just about Ghana and Africa as a continent, it was the extension of our diaspora as well, who are somewhere else. So African studies is not complete until they are also part of the equation. Since then, fellows have diligently carried out this mandate to excavate, reinterpret, and disseminate African history, beliefs, and practices. The Institute is multidisciplinary, with fellows ranging from architects to lawyers. It has 6 sections, namely history and politics, religion and philosophy, societies and cultures, language, literature and drama, music and dance, and media and visual arts. It offers the University of Ghana's undergraduate required course. The UGRC courses are mandatory courses that anybody passing through the university must have, and African studies had long been the only. Now there are other ones added to it, in its training. The introduction of African studies, as well as master's and PhD courses in African studies, is deeply enshrined in this Pan-Africanist, thought. The specializations that are in these sections that are mentioned include history, gender, religion, philosophy, music, dance, literature, linguistics, philosophy, politics, environment and development, and art history. It also hosts an audiovisual unit, a museum, and an archive. It is also one of the few institutions of higher learning in Africa with an endowed chair in African Studies, the Kwame Nkrumah Chair in African Studies, in honor of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah for his instrumental role in the promotion of Pan-Africanism. We are therefore extremely proud to be associated with this program. Looking at the rich array of activities lined up for the day, I believe that this program will not only reignite the flame of Pan-Africanism, lit by the founding mothers and fathers of Pan-Africanism, but also the children of Pan-Africanism who would bring to fruition the noble dreams that are conceived. Indeed, it gladdens my heart to see that this conversation is led by students of the Institute. generally led by, the younger generation, attesting to the training they have acquired in the institute concerning Pan-Africanism. Clearly, Pan-African vision still lives, and it is time to reimagine its direction in the 21st century. Lastly, I want to reiterate that I hope that by the end of this program, a clear path would have been charted, at least a path of a kind which is, debated and agreed upon to make the vision a reality. On this note, I welcome the African family, home and abroad, online and in person, to the Institute of African Studies, and I wish you all a very fruitful celebration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Acting Director. Thank you. Please give it up to him once. Words of wisdom, and we say thank you. So the next person we'd like to welcome is the Vice President of the African Studies Association of Africa, ASAA. Is the person of Professor Divine Fu, Director of the Institute of Humanities in Africa, HUMA, of the University of Cape Town. Please, let's give him a round of applause. Yes, and he is online, so please, thank you.
Thank you very much. I will start by saying thank you to the colleagues of Institute for African Studies and also the University of Ghana for organizing this event. And also thank you to my colleagues at the African Studies Association of Africa, Jiba, who is there with you. I see my brother Sheikh, who is sitting there from Global Africa. And also the colleagues at the university, at Gaston Berger University in Senegal, who have worked very hard with others, particularly Mampenda Ba, and also OSIWA, Open Society West Africa, who have really put in resources, to commit to this question of what to do with ourselves as Africans, what to do with the connection that we have with those who carry the DNA of Africa across the world, and also what to do with those who carry the DNA intellectually, politically, socially, and psychologically. So thank you for allowing us the opportunity to have this conversation, which is part of a series of a set of conversations that is organized in collaboration with other institutes by the African Studies Association of Africa. I'm not going to talk a lot about the African Studies Association of Africa because in 2017, we held the second biennial conference in Accra, hosted by the Institute for African Studies in Ghana, and also that one of our elder sisters and also mentor, Akosia Adamako Ampofo, has been really central to building this association and also giving it the vision as a space for Pan-African thoughts, for Pan-African encounters, and also Pan-African conversations. And it's important to note that this is not the only space. The association connects and works with many other organizations on the continent, like Codestria, like Austria, and other African studies associations across the world who take seriously the idea that in order for us to ask the question, what to do with the nightmare of colonization, what to do with the nightmare of racism, what to do with the nightmare of this person, what to do with the nightmare of a particular form of bigotry, that we have to find a space to connect with each other, to exchange ideas, to exchange experiences in order to think about possible frameworks, to continue. So I want to thank the colleagues who have given up their time and also the ideas to lead us in this conversation today. And we are hoping that by the end of the day, we will be able to have really critical conversations about how to push on, with the critical question of what to do with ourselves, as African people, how to connect to the diasporas, and how to connect to those who take Africa as a lens through which to inhabit, the world. My president, Toussaint, could not make it, but he sends you all of his greetings and will be present in the conversations. And I think he is a son of Ghana. In October, we will be in Lubumbashi for our 10th anniversary celebration to commemorate this practice of convening ideas, convening people to think around not just what Africa is on the continent, Africa is on the world, but also what it is to be working with the diaspora and all of those who sent to Africa as an experience, to advance the world and also to decenter the kinds of orthodox oppressive systems and also knowledge orthodoxies that continue to define who we are. So I can only wish you the best, and also continue to emphasize that we will continue to carry this project forward and also work not just with the Institute for African Studies, but also all other institutes for African Studies on the continent to push Pan-Africanism as a method or as a lens through which we advance ourselves, as African people. So for the next several years in the association, we have committed to building spaces like this across the continent, and not just in places where there are resources, but also to places where there are no resources, because these kinds of infrastructures and these kinds of convenings that bring people together really help to also build the kinds of intellectual and soft power in particular places, and also to push governments who sometimes at the forefront of preventing circulation of knowledge and circulation of people, to grow. So I wish you all the best. Thank you for doing this, and we look forward to participating and also to welcoming you in Lubumbashi for our 10th anniversary celebration.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, Professor Divainfo. Great. Yes. So we would at this point welcome the Ghana Dance Ensemble. We were greeted nicely when we were entering the room. Yes. So they would give us a short cultural expression. Thank you. Right. Let's show them some love. Let's give it up to them. They have done very well. Yes, this is Ghana Dance Ensemble. We would at this moment want to acknowledge the presence of some institutions who form a key part of this conversation. We would first want to acknowledge the Africa University College of Communication, the AUCC. Let's move a bit forward. The AUCC, let's give it up to them. Yes, we want to acknowledge the University of Media, Arts and Communication, UNIMAC. If they are here, you can give us a wave. Thank you. Then All African People's Revolution Party, APRP, yes. Then the Economic Fighters League, Good, thank you. And finally, we would acknowledge the Ghanaian Sign Language Institution, the GSL. Yes, let's give it up to them. Great, so now been welcomed. We've been welcomed both physically and virtually, and we've been welcomed with beautiful cultural display. We would want to now zoom into the purpose for which we have all assembled here. So, Nanekria.
Yes. So, we are moving on to the plenary discussion, and this will be moderated by Abdul Karim Ibrahim. So I'm going to give a very brief bio of our moderator. He is a graduate student here at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. His interest covers a variety of subjects, including decolonization, African philosophy and thought systems, societies and cultures, and football in Africa. He currently leads the Africa Office of Unite Parliamentary Network for Global Health, where he coordinates work with over 100 legislators in Africa. He previously worked at the All Africa Students Union headquarters here in Accra. Our moderator is also a journalist. Well, he says he's a retired journalist. As to whether he is or not, we will find out. And he has about a decade worth of experience in media practice in Ghana. So without much ado, let's Let us welcome our moderator for today, Abdul Karim Ibrahim.
Yes. And before the moderator speaks or introduces the rest of the panel, we would like everyone to take note of the following. When we move out of this room, you find ladies and gents doors. If you have any inconvenience, you can enter and then take care of yourself. And also, as the conversation goes on, kindly share, retweet, or tweet with the hashtag Pan-African Conversations, because this conversation is going to go throughout the entire continent. We are starting here, and we will have other conversations along the continent or along the shores of the continent, if you like to put it that way. So if you want to make an input, if you want to share, kindly tweet, post with the hashtag Pan-African Conversations. Thank you. So,
thank you very much. Thank you very much, and a very good morning to all of you.
apologies.
Yeah, hello. Great. So thank you once again, and a very good morning to all of you. As has already been introduced, my name is Abdul Karim Ibrahim, and I think that it is very important to set the record straight once again. I'm a retired journalist. Oftentimes, you get retired only when your knees are not working very well. But mine are working fine, but I have still retired. And so that's for the record. Thank you very much. And I'm truly honored and privileged to be given this opportunity and platform to moderate this all-important discussion. And as you are aware, the conversation around Pan-Africanism didn't start now. And for some reason, we're not going to end it now. Just before I entered into the auditorium, I was having conversation, debate on Pan-Africanism with my own mentor here at the Institute of African Studies. I won't mention his name because I didn't tell him I was going to do this. So it only tells me that this debate would continue to go on and on. We're discussing revitalizing Pan-Africanism in the 21st century. And by the very title, there's a certain admission, however discomforting, that perhaps we have gone back on the progress on Pan-Africanism, and for that matter, we need to go back and do something about it. The role, the essence, the utility of Pan-Africanism is obviously not in doubt at all. But even if there was any challenge whatsoever with that, I believe that the point of that is to remind us to come back to the table and have a conversation on that. And I'm very happy that today we're going to do that. And to help us have this conversation, I'm going to be inviting here on the stage the discussants. I know that we have 4 discussants, and quite unfortunately we have 3 here. We have 1 person also. Okay, so yes, so there's going to be an additional seat up here. So let me start with those that I know, so that if I do the introduction, I would introduce someone who may not exactly be here. So I'll begin with our very own, right from here, and I've had the chance to have her on a radio platform a couple of times. Namata Sarimaga Musisi is the Fighter General, Economic Fighters League. Namata is a Pan-Africanist with roots in Uganda, an architect, and her work is also intended to facilitate the movement towards decoloniality, focusing on the people of Africa and the global south, and how we can facilitate the reclamation of African identity as defined by inhabited space and its making. Architecture led Namata to activism and to socialism. She's a former diaspora coordinator for People Power, the Ugandan liberation movement led by Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, popularly known as Bobi Wine, and currently also serves as the Fighter General of the Economic Fighters League. And if Namata is here, with a round of applause, let's welcome her up here. Thank you, Namata. Thank you once again, Namata, for coming. I'll still stay at home before I invite those who have traveled all the way here, so that they come here and then they welcome them together with me. Hey, Kumado, Eric, is also a doctoral candidate here at the Institute of African Studies. His research interests revolve around the multifaceted dimensions of anti-colonial resistance by historical figures, ordinary people, and workers. His dissertation project is a historical examination of resistance to forced labor policies in the mines of colonial Ghana. Teku Mado has a multidisciplinary background in philosophy, psychology, African literature, history, oral tradition, and urban studies. Prior to joining the PhD program, he was involved in research collaborations on agrarian economics, labor, peasant, cocoa farmer organizations, peacekeeping, and mining history. His forthcoming publication in the Makerere Institute of Social Research Review, volume 6, is titled Black Skin, White Names, the Place of Naming in the Colonial Cultural Thought. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Eric to the platform. Thank you very much, Eric, for also joining us. And now I go to Dr. Rachel V. Brown. Is a proud Jamaican communication specialist, activist, and lecturer based here in Ghana. She holds a BA in communication, a master's degree in law, and a PhD in media, communication, and culture. Dr. Rachel is the co-founder and executive director of the Every Miracle Foundation, a youth-based and youth-led nonprofit serving in many areas, including ending hunger, environmental sustainability, youth advocacy, women's empowerment, global citizenship, health, culture, education, the performing arts, and sports. So something that we share in common because I love sports also. In 2019, she was named as one of the Caribbean's 30 under 30, and in 2021, she was named by the United Nations FAO as a World Food Forum champion and will serve in that capacity until 2026. Dr. Rachel also believes we have the power and duty to heal and protect our earth and its people through education, then implementation of impactful and sustainable changes. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, let's welcome Dr. Rachel V. Brown. I saved the last but not least for Dr. Sheikh Thiam. He is a professor of English and Black Studies at Amherst College and the author and editor of several volumes on negritude and African philosophy and literature, including Return to the Kingdom of Childhood, Re-envisioning the Philosophical Relevance of Negritude, the first book-length study of Leopold Sedar Senghor's theory of negritude as philosophy and epistemologies from the Global South. Negritude, Modernity, and the Idea of Africa, which was also recently published by the University of KwaZulu-Natal Press. Dr. Sheikh Thiam's scholarship focuses on the ways in which Africa-centered epistemologies engage with colonial, post-colonial, and decolonial intellectual traditions, question the language divide in Africana studies, interrogate anti-Black racism in literature, philosophy, and cultural studies, and shape conceptions of being and identity in Africa and the African diaspora. He's also a former associate editor of research in African literature and editor of African Studies Review, the Journal of the African Studies Association. Dr. Sheikh Thiam is also the editor of Negritude Reloaded, a special issue of the Journal of African Philosophy, and the forthcoming volume, Pan-Africanism, African Research, and Global Future, with Dr. Mjiba Freyiwot. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, with a round of applause, let's welcome Dr. Sheikh Thiam. Thank you very much, Dr. Thiam, for also joining us here. And just before we get into things, I think it was yesterday that I saw Dr. Thiam make a post about this event on his Facebook platform. And I went there to make a comment. Of course, I didn't know him on Facebook before yesterday. I went there to make a comment and to also share and tell my friends on Facebook that I had the honor of being the moderator for this event. If you saw anything about that, you would have seen the name Nana Kwame Ajim Jebu and not Abdul Karim Ibrahim, because I work with two names. My parents give me one from Saudi Arabia, and there's one that I covet quite a lot, and these days I use that on Facebook. And so you can call me Nana Kwame, you can call me Abdul Karim, whatever it is, I would respond. So thank you all of you once again, and we're going to begin this conversation, but quickly I want to give you a bit of some context in regards to what it is that we will be discussing. What would happen after I give you this very short context is to get to our panelists and have them share with us their general views and take on this subject for maximum about 5 minutes each, after which we would come in with a few follow-up questions, and then we'll take your contributions also right here from the auditorium and, of course, online as well. So on revitalizing Pan-Africanism in the 21st century, Pan-Africanism as a movement is concerned with the total liberation and unification of the African people globally. Pan-Africanism was central at the 1958 All-African Peoples Conference held in Ghana, which was a watershed moment for most African states' independence. It was also central in Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and the CPP's administration. The Pan-African spirit was also central in Tanzania, where Julius Nyerere, Mwalimu, and the then OAU, African Liberation Committee based. The 20th century was filled with Pan-African activity from diverse dimensions, from organizations, individuals, academics, activists, and governmental institutions. The 21st century, again, has also witnessed varying degrees of Pan-African activity across global Africa. However, it appears that there is a nosedive in vitality of the activities and conversations surrounding Pan-Africanism. Historical events, changing geopolitics, and the state of African people post the 20th century has adversely affected the veracity of Pan-Africanism in the 21st century. The conference, as you are all part of now, and this conversation that we're going to have, will seek to interrogate the revitalization and transformation of the Pan-African movement in the 21st century by engaging all of you here and those on the platform and those joining us via Zoom and other platforms on all of these very important matters. So on that note, I want to first begin with the person that I invited last here. I'll start with Dr. Sheikh Thiam to take generally your thoughts on this very complex, very difficult subject of Pan-Africanism and where we stand now and what we must do in order to revitalize Pan-Africanism.
Thank you, my brother Nana or Abdul Karim, whichever. I'm so happy to be here. I've had the chance to give lectures and participate in conversations around the world. But being here at the Institute of African Studies, I didn't realize how strong that was until I got here this morning. And I feel like all my body started reacting to it. And I'm glad to see you all and to be here, especially my friend he thinks he's from Ghana, but he's from Senegal. Kwabena, the funny thing is, Kwabena and I, when we walk around in the US, people think I'm Ghanaian and he's Senegalese. He's the one that looks, so thank you everybody. My knees hurt, but I'm not retired. Especially today. So this is a very interesting question, I think, and thanks for bringing me to this conversation. As you mentioned, my sister, Dr. Frehiwat, and I just finished the introduction of our forthcoming special issue on Pan-Africanism. And one of the questions that we were asking is, how do we situate Pan-Africanism in our histories? There's sort of a consensus that Pan-Africanism started in the 20th century with the conferences, the Pan-African conferences, 1900, and continues today through the African Union or other less questionable institutions. But we kept thinking about the difference between Pan-Africanism as a mode of being, as an engagement with the very nature of Africa and Africanness, and the institutionalization of Pan-Africanism. So one of the questions that we asked was, what is really Africa, and how do we think about Africa? Is Africa something that is essential, natural? Or is Africa like any communities and invented communities? When did we start to think of ourselves as Africans? And we came to the argument that it is really with the encounter with Euromodernity that, if we like it or not, Africa was born. But yet Africa is not a European invention. It is arguable that it is the Akan, the Yoruba, the Wolof, the Fulani that were captured, that started thinking about themselves as Africans. When these Africans were captured somewhere, when they engaged, thank you. Our history, the history of Black studies in general, we've thought of the encounter between the so-called master and the African as a very modern encounter. And our argument is that these so-called Africans were fundamental African. And in our communities, especially in West African communities, the idea of a slave is linked to the absence of kin. A slave is a subject that is kinless. And we can develop that a little bit. So these Yoruba, this Fulani, this Akan, that engage in this process of enslavement, understood very well the necessity to keep community, to keep being part of the kin. And that's the moment when they engage as Africans. So for that matter, the idea of Africa itself is inseparable from the idea of Pan-Africanism. They're concomitant. One cannot exist without the other. Africa, the diaspora, and Pan-Africanism were born at the same time. And they are fundamentally now not just a political stand, but they're also an epistemic stand, a mode of reclaiming one's subjectivity to define oneself, which is at the same time in itself, right, essentially a political stand. So why is that important? Because definitions matter. And thinking about Pan-Africanism in those terms and making the difference between Pan-Africanism and the systematization of Pan-Africanism leads us to a moment like this one. Revitalization, yes. Vitalization. Is Pan-Africanism dead? What do we revitalize? The systematization or the institutionalization? Or just the engagement with our realities and our existences, right? Which in itself imply, of course, the liberation of the spaces we call home. Today, I think there's more and more we woke, right? The realization of the limits of the concept of decolonization in itself, right? Or at least what we have called decolonization. Have they really happened? Now, I think, what is clear, what the decolonial scholars have been articulating for the past 20 years, I think has been always clear for people of African descent, that our world has been built on the negation of African humanities, and therefore the end of the administrative part of colonization has not had the effect of the decolonization of the very foundation of colonization itself, or of coloniality. So never has Pan-Africanism as a mode of affirmation of our own selves, of engagement, political engagement, but also essentially, I think, epistemological engagement that will allow us to define ourselves of who we are and imagine our futures, our conception of the good life, and implement them, has never been as important and as necessary. Just to finish, because I'm getting too long, that also, we should, however, avoid the populist implications of this awakening. I'm not sure about the Anglophone world, but in the Francophone world, there is a rebirth of Pan-Africanism, But this rebirth of Pan-Africanism in the Francophone world is not necessarily going the way we want. It is becoming, and what I call often a black way of being white, which is the replication of white populism, of white nativism, and of white terrorism, just now with the color of blackness. Pan-Africanism, blackness, Pan-Africanism is essentially a pluriversal space that acknowledges the existence of Africa, but its diversity. So I'm just gonna stop there for now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thiam, for that beautiful preliminary remarks there. And for me, it raises one key question that I hope that we can come back to, because we're all watching what is happening, especially as Dr. Thiam talks about the Francophone spaces or West Africa. And sometimes we wonder really if there is any point to it beyond just the immediate angst, legitimate really, but whether or not it could be sustainable within the context of Pan-Africanism and the sort of things that we want to really address. So thank you very much. I want to take this to Namartha at this point, and to also take your preliminary remarks on this subject. I know the kind of work that you do with the Economic Fighters League and activism that also doesn't appear to really get the sort of support that it requires. And I know this for a fact because I've seen you people come on radio, do your discussions, and when we open the phone lines or read the text messages, it's not as encouraging as one would expect. But generally, tell us your thoughts also on this idea of revitalizing Pan-Africanism.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this conversation. It's so important, and I think it's also encouraging whenever we still have these spaces in which we can have these conversations. I have been finding in the current crisis that we are in, I have been needing to take moments to just reflect. I need to find small moments where you can sort of step away from the noise and the chaos and the propaganda and everything, even the jargon and all of that, just to sort of reflect truly what is at the core of everything that we are dealing with, And the purpose of that reflection has always been trying to understand why we have fallen in terms of the trajectory of Pan-Africanism, what has created that sort of slump in the movement forward towards African unity, towards total liberation of Africans. And in that moment, I found that in those reflections, I feel like what I see is fear. And what I mean by fear is that we, as the current generations pushing towards African unity, we are living the realities of which we were warned. We are living the realities that Nkrumah told us about. We are living the warnings that we were told would come and take us if we did not unite to liberate ourselves. And so in those moments, I think what ends up happening is we find ourselves in these sorts of paralyzed moments in recognition of the weight of that reality, in recognition of the fact that every single aspect of our being is still tied to conquest and imperialism and the undermining of the African being. And that paralysis is causing us to sort of respond in various ways. Either we get caught in continual diagnosis without action, or just in compromise. Now, when I say we get caught in discourse, I am not trying to say that we shouldn't be having these conversations. I'm not saying that it is wrong. It is necessary. We cannot dismiss the revolutionary power of African pedagogy. But what I'm recognizing is that at the moment what I see a lot is a lot of discourse, but not enough action. And again, I'm not denying that there is work being done towards what is happening, but the fact is, I think in the space of fear that we end up in, that comes out of that paralysis, out of being in this situation that we were warned about, we end up in a position where we are looking at the thing and saying, this is the thing, this is the thing, this is the thing, where do we go? And we imagine and we diagnose and we theorize and we try, but a lot of the time we are not able to act in the ways that we need to be able to act. Now, in thinking about that, in realizing that we are operating from a space of fear, you start to look at the ways in which that fear plays out. And one of the things that I see a lot is that there has become this sort of, out of the dispossession that we are feeling and that is being expressed, there has come this sort of need for messianic figures to come and save us. And so you can see it in conditions like where people are dealing with a rotten political situation and yet they are deciding to accept whatever choices are before them. You see it when we have a wave of coups across West Africa, and while we know that we must dismantle French imperialism and any imperialism wherever we see it, we celebrate before interrogating what the root of what the origins of those coups are. Where are these people coming from? Is this intra-class war? Or are these people working towards revolutionary warfare, towards the total liberation of the people? So we are in a situation where we have become so oppressed by the realities around us that oftentimes we end up accepting a form of the oppression that seems like it is less than another reality or the current reality. And we sort of slip into those spaces and we become unable to act, and we look for these messianic figures to save us because we have been dispossessed. We do not feel that we own our revolution. We do not feel that we own our futures, our land, our resources. And so what needs to happen in order for us to break out of the space of fear that we are in is that reclamation of that sense of ownership. And to reclaim that sense of ownership, what has to happen in my mind, and in the work that we do as the Economic Fighters League, is we have to connect our philosophy to our material reality. And when I say that, it is in recognition of the fact that a lot of the times, like you said, you don't necessarily get the responses that you're looking for. But it's also because when we're sitting with our material reality, we often tend to inadvertently become paternalistic towards the people that we are working to liberate along with ourselves. We forget that a woman selling used clothes in Ashaman knows why we need a common currency, because every time the cedi falls against the dollar, she is suffering because she has to buy her clothes with sefa. The fishermen in Apam, in Jamestown, they know what it means when the Chinese are coming in with their trawlers and taking all of the produce that they would have been using to sustain their livelihoods. Ugandans, when schools were closed for 2 years, were feeling that reality of the need for a borderless Africa, because they were trying to find places to send their children to go to school while schools were closed. So we often forget that the material reality is the one that births that Pan-Africanism. The material reality is the one that teaches us and shows us the ways in which we sustain the movement towards a Pan-African future. When we are unable to connect to that material reality, what ends up happening is that these extremely important pillars of Pan-Africanism that we have created and that we continue to create in moments and in spaces like these, if we do not connect it to the material reality, then what ends up happening is we create silos instead. They do not become the future that we are imagining. And so for me, that is a huge point of reflection at the moment. How are we to connect all of this knowledge that we have? We are pregnant with knowledge. The United Africa is waiting to be born. So how do we connect it to the material reality in such a way that it is not just those of us who have had the privilege of having access to this information and knowledge that are taking ownership of it? So again, it comes back to that lady in Ashama who has to buy the clothes with sefa, and the fishermen in Apam, and the parents in Uganda. And so we have to do that work of reconnecting. And this is not, again, it's not a criticism of the need for these spaces. This is where a lot of the ideas and theories of born, and this is how we refine and shape it. But I think we also have to break into that space where we are continuously connecting to that material reality, towards that future that we are working towards. Every time I reflect on that, I keep going back to what CIC is always quoting, our CIC is always quoting Nkrumah on this. You know, live among the people, learn their ways, start with what they know. And the thing is that we often forget is that the people know that Africa must unite because it is in their lived reality. So for me, the focus is how do we connect to the material reality? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Namata, for that very important point. I want to now bring it to Dr. Rachel Brown to also make your preliminary remarks. And I'm getting loads of things that we would definitely have a conversation on after this. I know we don't have much time, but we're going to try. Dr.
Great.
Rachel.
I have my watch. So I'm going to keep track. All right. Hello, everyone. Morning? I don't know. It is. Okay. I'm going to need some help from you, okay? When I notion to you, I want you to say the word us. All right? We're going to practice right now. Thank you. Pan-Africanism simply means Pan-Africanism simply means that even though there are billions of us, there is only one us. Even though we have many differences, there is only one sure thing that makes the others different from us. Even though we have many experiences, we all experience the glory, the honor, the privilege, the strife, the pride, the struggle, the victory that is being African, that is being us. There is only one Africa and only one. Pan-Africanism is not merely a historical concept. It is a written and unwritten story inspired by us that will continue as long as an us exists. Pan-Africanism is not just a movement. It is how we move. It is where we move. It is why we move. It is the fact that in spite of the many forces trying to stop us in our tracks, we continue to move forward together. It is a living, breathing force that moves within our veins and through generations. It defines who we are. It defines us. Pan-Africanism didn't need to be called Pan-Africanism because it existed way before it was named. It has existed for as long as there has been an us. It cannot die while there is an us. It is the usness. It is synonymous with us. So today I want to talk to us about Pan-Africanism. I want to talk to us about us. We need to get together, and we need to get it together. And while it is unfair that we have had to fight for hundreds of years because our greatness has intimidated others so much that they chose to oppress us and suppress us in an attempt to break us and separate us, today, brothers and sisters, I want to ask you to keep fighting for us. Know that physically being torn apart, captured, forced to spend months in chains on a boat in filth, vomit, and blood amidst the constant disappearance of brothers and sisters thrown overboard by others or themselves, the whips, the cuts, the lashes, the rapes, the lynchings, the work, the pain, the hunger, the separation of families, the changing of names, the attempt to change our identities, the cutting out of our mother tongues, the colonization, the mental enslavement, the time that has passed while those who remained had to come to terms with the fact that they may never see their loved ones again. None of that could eliminate. None of that could keep us apart. And even though oceans have separated us, we were and always will be together. Here we are, in spite of all of that, together. We were, we are, and we will always be. Today I have two questions for us. One, what do we want for us? And two, are you willing to do whatever it takes to accomplish that for us? I can tell you what I dream of for us. Independence, unity, wealth, equality, health, safety, empowerment, impact, pride, joy, and peace. How does that list sound? What else would you add to it? Think about it today and onwards. Keep thinking about it. And think about it until the thoughts force us to really do something about it. These changes will take time, many generations probably, but luckily our generations will be ready because we will ensure that they are. They, just like us, have the strength of our ancestors, the wisdom from the lessons they learned, and so many new tools at our disposal. Today, as we think about revitalizing Pan-Africanism in the 21st century, I encourage us to use those tools for us, to fight for us, to win for us, because nobody deserves it more than us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would also borrow and say all of turn our attention to Eric for his comments also.
Thank you very much. My friend with two names. I don't know why you insist on calling me by Eric when you see. I've told you that many times. Okay, so my discussion this morning addresses the theme from two perspectives. One at the macro level and two at the micro level. At both levels, I seek to attend to the question of where sovereignty resides. And I see sovereignty from two perspectives. At the macro or collective level, and at the micro or the individual level. In the many iterations of Pan-Africanism, we cannot lose the question of the place of sovereignty. Now, concerning our collective sovereignty, it must be clear to many of us that that special purpose vehicle forged by our liberators to lead not only our liberation efforts, but also our unification is no longer fit for purpose. And I'm speaking directly here of the African Union. While we acknowledge its past achievements, we also have to admit that it has failed at one key thing, which is simply promotion of Pan-African consciousness among Africans. Now, where does that leave us? I have two proposals from two liberators, one known for thought and action and one known in academic circles. These are the persons of Kwame Nkrumah and Samir Amin. Now, Nkrumah's call for All-African Revolutionary Party and Samir Amin's prescription of a tricontinental alliance both have one thing in common, that our movement towards true and proper liberation must be people-led and not state-led. Now, revelations from a recently published book by Susan Williams titled White Malice, the CIA and the Covert Recolonization of Africa, provide sufficient justification for a people-led movement against a state-led or regional or continental bureaucracies that have been overrun today by neoliberalism. Case in point is the ridiculous threats of war by ECOWAS leaders against the people of Niger in the uprising that took place recently. Now, at the micro level, I choose to discuss a move which seems symbolic but immeasurably powerful, which has to do with something that has come up here. It concerns names, okay? And I invite us to take a closer look at the names we bear and what they mean for our personal sovereignties. Now, the loss of sovereignty concerning names involved a colonial imposition under the guise of civilization or Christianization. Yet a close look at its history reveals the usurpation of the sovereignty to bear names that offer more truthful illustrations of who we are and to whom we belong. Enough of our liberators in thought and action excised, rejected, and replaced their colonial names. They knew this to be a dismemberment of the African identities. And I consider this a worthy path to follow. While we are on naming and renaming ourselves, we must also turn our Pan-African energies to this area of some of our most important heritage sites. In a recent rendering by Candice Milliard on the search for the world's longest river, we again see the astonishing arrogance of a British adventurer called Speke, or I don't know how the name is pronounced, or Speck, whatever it is, who renamed the lake known by the people who have lived around it as Nalubale. I'm sure you all know this lake better as Lake Victoria. This will be my preliminary comment. Asante sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nate Kumado. I've retired the Eric for now. But I should also note that I'll be coming to the audience very shortly for some comments and engagement, and of course also those of you who have joined us virtually. But I want to very quickly put a question to Dr. Thiam based off on what Namata also said. This issue of discourse versus action nexus, if any at all. And there's a certain binary approach to many things. And as a result of that, even Pan-Africanists, those who confess to believing and practicing it to the core, are sometimes questioned whether or not they end it at a point of theorization and at a point of thinking without putting in the work as well. From the perspective of a Pan-Africanist thinker, how do you resolve this question? Do you think that it goes without saying that if you are Pan-Africanist, you must as well also be on the ground and do the work? Or do you also conceptualize doing the work as having been done if you just are one who is engaged in the academy, in the research, and in the thinking? How do you resolve that? Because, I mean, there's always the case that it's never enough.
Thank you. That's a very good question. My grandmother used to say, ajoju fejowul doy na ci duma. It's a way of saying that you may theorize that you may theorize who you are, that you are a billionaire until tomorrow. But people don't need to correct you. They will just wait until the moment when you'll be hungry. And then that, being hungry and not having enough food to eat is enough punishment for those sort of lies. What my grandmother was saying is that a theory that is completely disconnected from reality is like an empty bucket, like an empty bucket. It's never gonna fool a goat. about research in universities that function as nothing but the continuation of white supremacy with beautiful words. And a lot of Pan-Africanists have left universities for that matter. I think, as my sister said, it's also in place, so-called places of theories and theorization, but some of the things that we do have been conceptualized, you know. And the traditional, we have to also be careful, the traditional dichotomy between theory and praxis, which is really rooted in the modern European tradition that conceives that those who are on top of the hierarchy have to sit in their ivory tower and tell the masses what to do. South African scholar Ramose Mugabe theorizes African philosophy as a philopraxis. So the engagement with reality is in itself a theoretical work. My personal work, like the last book I published this summer, I argue that African philosophy, African art, is philosophy. Not as a discourse that is theorized by some of us, but the art itself, as a verb, is a philosophical work. So what my sister is doing, that engagement is a philosophical work in itself. So what we need to do, though, in spaces like this, is not just talk, it's also do, right? The thinker-doer is what a Pan-Africanist engagement should be. My brother, Kwabena, who's just back, and I worked for an institution that's called the School for International Training. And the very philosophy of the School of International Training is experiential learning. It's not just experience that detached. You don't do experience and therefore learn. But experiential is an experiential engagement with theory and praxis that's completely inseparable. And that is what learning is from a Pan-African perspective. And it's the way we frame the question and the traditional dichotomy that is rooted in universities between practice for that matter, and theory is the issue and the problem. And the examples that you give, when you engage with people who are not supposed to be intellectual, you realize that knowledge and the capacity to make sense of the struggle is more democratic than we think.
On this note, I want to stay again with Namata because this point flows from the point that you make. I wonder also if by this, and again, Thiam just makes, we are also perhaps not glamorizing too much. And again, I say this with very cautious of also not attempting to create a certain view that some people know more than the others. But I guess the point is that if really right up to the point of the market, the person who's selling used clothes or tomatoes and all, if they all truly, fully appreciate and understand the complexity or, this problem that we are dealing with, one would wonder, therefore, why is Pan-Africanism, the aspirations of Pan-Africanism, the assumptions of Pan-Africanism, not as popular as one would think that it should be? If the premise is accurate, that people understand whatever it is that they are dealing with in their daily lives.
I'll first start out by saying that intellectual labor is labor, right? We can't deny that that is part of the work towards our liberation, right? When you look at any oppressed people, there tends to be a way in which the oppressor has dealt with them in such a manner that they can only focus on the current existence that they have within a certain sort of smaller framework. It becomes very hard to imagine beyond your present moment, right? Because you are sitting in survival mode. You are trying to get from day to day, from moment to moment, from period to period. And so I think this is where we may sometimes fall short, where if we are unable to take something that reads as an abstract concept and connect it to people's homes and to their plates, right, in languages that are their own, then people are unable to then also claim ownership of that which they already knew. You see, when you have a situation where, I'll give an example. A couple of years ago, as a movement, the Economic Fighters League, we launched a campaign called Berlin Must Fall, right? And for those who know, it is, talking about the fact that we need to sort of deal with the effects of the scramble for Africa and all of that. But even in the name of our campaign, we were very proud of ourselves when we came up with it. But how did that connect to people on the ground? How were people supposed to take ownership of that when there's a whole history implied and which we were not necessarily explaining or could not explain in every moment? You see what I'm saying? And so, as much as we wanted it to, it did not take off as much as it should have, right? But then when you look at, for example, the situation, and I always use Uganda as a reference simply because that's where my roots are. When I first came to Ghana, so many things would happen and I'd be like, I've watched this film, I know what's going on here. Because the situations were so similar. And so when we were organizing against, with the Economic Fighters League, trying to back up Ugandans in Uganda, Africans in Uganda, we found that the most effective way of doing it was pointing to the similarities of experience that people had. So it was people empathizing simply because they recognized that space. Our knowledge, I think, because we often tend to sort of, not that we tend to, but what possibly happens in some spaces is that we don't recognize that the expression of something in a language that does not necessarily fit a framework that has been ascribed can sometimes be dismissed or marginalized or actually just not even heard. And at the same time, those of us who have access to the spaces of knowledge production and all of that, I feel, as we had in the situation with the Berlin Must Fall campaign, we did not do enough to now make sure that it connected to people's lived realities. So again, intellectual labor is labor. And the work that happens on the ground is also labor. They are one labor towards a common goal. But in order to ensure that they connect, what has to happen is that the languages that are used to sort of capture it as well have to be reflective of our realities in order for it to sort of now start to make sense. In a crisis, I'm not going to be thinking about an abstract concept if I am dealing with the food on my plate, if I'm dealing with the situation at home and school fees and all the basic issues. But if we are able to start making those connections in very tangible ways, I feel like we will see a shift in how people claim ownership of it. Let the people take ownership of it.
Thank you very much, Martha. I think I will borrow it off Martha. Thank you very much. Because of how profound this point of connecting the realities and the thought, I want to ask Dr. Rachel, what do you think also about revitalizing Pan-Africanism within the context of globalization? Because for the vast majority of us, generally as young people, if I pick my phone today and I jump on TikTok, there's virtually no barrier in terms of what content I'm seeing, be it from somewhere in Taiwan or in Uganda or wherever it is. And as a result of that also, I get a sense that over time, a new crop of people have emerged who perhaps may not exactly object to Pan-Africanism and its aspirations, but the reality of their daily interactions and engagement means that they are completely removed from this idea of Pan-Africanism and the aspirations therein. So how do you situate Pan-Africanism within this global reality that continues to perhaps subvert the goals and the distinct nature of movement and activism like what Pan-Africanism encourages us to do.
Thank you. I'm not going to call you Nana or Abdul. It's going to be Nana Abdul. So that's a really important question. Let me try this mic. So two main thoughts. One, I think a lot of people think about Pan-Africanism as this antiquated concept, as a theory, as something that has previously existed, that people talked about a long time ago. They think about it like Marxism or communism or one of these things, a way of thought. But it is a lifestyle. It is us. It is who we are. And so I think young people, us, we need to embrace the fact that this is who we are. This is how we are. The second thought that I have on that is that older generations, we, us, whoever it may be, we're also guilty of this separation, right? Where we're seeing young people and we're saying, oh, young people are like, this morning I'm a little bit guilty of this. I was talking to Rosie about not taking videos like a Gen Zer. Okay, you know, they do the twisting and the, don't like it. But the fact of the matter is, we have all of these tools and all of these brains and all of these people and all of these ideologies that are assets to us and assets to the movement. And the only way for us to move forward is to embrace all that is new. Because if we fight against change, how can we achieve change? Doesn't make sense. So I think we need to use all of these tools, all the social medias, and also combine it with traditional forms. We need to listen to our youth, empower them, give them the platforms that they need to show us, to teach us what is important and what is necessary, because the fact of the matter is our problems are not their problems, and the next generation's problems will not be their problems. So we can't fix it for everyone. And we can't fix it by ourselves. We do not have the equipment, the knowledge, the insight. So the only way for us to move forward is to embrace these tools, embrace young people, and get the job done.
Thank you very much. I would take one final bit, still on this subject of globalization and what potentially, maybe a challenge for realizing the aspirations of Pan-Africanism within this context. Let me just make a quick point here before Na comes in. I hope Na is fine enough. So I was talking to a friend, and he just blurted out in Pidgin that, yeah, I've been a little unwell, so forgive me, that he just know they make sense. And by that, it means that Pan-Africanism, just as Dr. Rachel just talks about it, with the view that people have of it as being this antiquated idea, he says it just know they make sense. And for someone who Pan-Africanism makes sense to you, how do you think that we might be able to package it in a way, I mean in the discourse, so that people generally would appreciate the essence of it and then will be able to carry on the mandate and aspirations as it is?
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll start off with a saying about how it's easier to direct the growth of a child and more difficult to mend a broken adult. Okay? And that's exactly the point that I don't think it's me. Okay, it's working. That's about the exact point that making Pan-Africanism make sense should start from. We all start life. At some point, we go to school. What do we learn there? From the very beginning, I learned about a certain London Bridge. I learned about a certain London burning. Now, the impact of these things is that they direct your primary allegiance as a child, as a person whose mind is now forming. Now, given the importance of Ghana in the African liberation movement, given the fact that we've had OAU for as long as it has existed, why is it easy for AU today to call African leaders and get them to draft a statement or a continental policy towards the coup makers in, Niger, Ivory Coast, Guinea, and so on? Like, they draw up very clear policies about what? About how to disengage with them in various things. I'm told that, I've not been to the market in a while, but I'm told that when the coup in Niger took place, onion prices increased in Ghana. Am I right? Yeah, that's correct. Now, if the AU could invite African leaders or foreign ministers to draft things that become quick policies of that nature, why is it unable, after all these years, all these decades, to look at nursery rhymes, okay? Just nursery rhymes, and also draft something which should be implemented by all the member countries? So I would say there's a fundamental problem with how our orientation as young persons who become adults, there's a fundamental problem with that orientation process. And that orientation process, as we all know, creates alienation. We are alienated from our own reality. So somebody grows up, he's engaged in his struggle, and he thinks Pan-Africanism is nonsense. But he wouldn't think that globalization is nonsense. Why? Because in our formation, we were taught to value or to develop allegiance for one and not the other. Yeah, so that would be my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. On that point, I'm going to come to the room and to get some contributions from there. But this point that now makes about education is very important, because a few days ago, an organization that I belong to, Speech Forces, were taking entries from high school students for a public speaking competition sometime later this month. And we allow for high school students to decide on a topic that they want to speak for a few minutes and use that as their entry. And not to trigger anybody here, I'm just going to share with you what one of them said in the video. A very brilliant, articulate young lady from one of the best schools here in Ghana. And in making her point, she was essentially talking about colonialism and, wait for it, how it brought civilization to Ghana. And for me, we had a difficulty as to whether or not we would choose this candidate, because in terms of what she was talking about, her mannerism, everything that we were looking out for, and the fact that this would be somebody that we could train, we thought that she had everything. But this was also a view that she was sharing very eloquently and with everything that I believe she had in her. But that is also the reality of the victim that she is, perhaps herself, because based on the training and the education that we have had, having learned about the benefits of colonialism, among many other things in our primary school, I was not surprised. So this point is just to affirm Na's point that he just made. But at this point, we would be happy to take contributions and engagement from among the rest of us. I see a hand coming up here already. And so if somebody would help us with a microphone. Yeah. Maybe we would take 3 comments or questions, engagement, and get some responses, and then maybe we can come back later. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Please pardon my English if it's not correct, because if I'm mixing them, please pardon me, because I'm not an English person. I'm an African. Okay. Okay. I don't know whether I will leave it to you people to decide whether mine is a comment or is a proposition or something, because speaking on what this doctor just said right now, concerning our education. My point I have is that I'm a Muslim, so in Islam we are being taught that you are not a good Muslim until you wish for your brother what you wish for yourself. And my point is that as Africans, we tend to be greedy. We keep on speaking about the white man colonizing us, neocolonialism. We are speaking about a whole lot of things. Yeah. But I see the point to be that we are greedy as we can be, as Africans. Why am I saying this? Because when colonization started first, they came to us. And how did they get into us? They came and they started, like, they studied us and knew that very well that we Africans, we are greedy. I don't care about you as my brother. You don't care about me too. All you care about is you yourself. And they started promising us that, okay, you, Mr. So-so and so, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. And being greedy, you feel that, okay, yes, I'll be well off if I take what they are giving to me. And you started sacrificing everybody for your own. And that's how colonization was born. And they started, the chiefs were then started, like the chiefs then started selling our brothers and sisters to the Europeans. And it empowered them. Okay, years down the line, how did neocolonialism start? It was also born by our current leaders being greedy once again. The French, the English, or the United States, they started promising them, okay, if you allow us to invade your country, take this minerals so and so. We'll give you a house or somewhere in Miami or in London, or like we'll give you all this and this. So they agreed and they sacrificed the whole population for their own common good, which is not the best way to go about things. Because if you are a leader, we elected you, you are supposed to do what's best for the whole nation. So if we Africans, if we leave greediness out of our whole being and think about our brothers, we'll be able to we'll be able to grow and unify as a nation. Because I was told that Nkrumah, when Ghana gained independence, what I read in the book was Nkrumah was using Ghana's money to help other African countries to gain independence. And
so maybe Africans are not greedy after all. But I think that the point is very much. And let's try and take some more comments. We have a comment online. You may introduce yourself and make your comment. I'm unable to know who exactly, so if you can hear me, you can unmute and make your comment.
Oh, okay. Hello. Wait, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, this is Yawasari speaking. Thank you all for your submissions. Just a few quick comments and questions. The first is, usually when we speak of African unity, what usually comes up is the rhetoric of Africa being a diverse, continent, diverse people, which I find very uninteresting and very lazy. So especially to Namata, talking about trying to head towards African unity, what response would you have to that? And also, what are some tangible steps, whilst in this room, we can be thinking of to start linking thoughts, to action? And also wanted to point out that, the points that Now was also making, they are, they are really small, but they are very good. Many times we tend to forget that big changes are made up of the little things. But I know Now is also talking about, taking a look at nursery rhymes and whatnot. So I was saying, Now, is this something you'll be willing to take up? Let's just start delegating tasks right now so that the next seminar, whatnot, we are not back again talking about how we need to, change nursery rhymes, or we need to do so and so and whatnot. So these are my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more comment now, and then we'll come back to the panelists for the.
Good morning, all. My name is Nankura Motepyu. I was born Trevor Light Beckford, African born on the island of Jamaica. I now migrated to Ghana to resettle on the continent of Africa. And how do we connect? I think Pan-Africanism should have a base that it is tied to. And I'm recommending that we type Pan-Africanism to the Marcus Garvey philosophy and opinions. And by doing so, what do I want? What do we want for us? I want us to have, we as Caribbean people and people from Latin America, I speak specifically for us. We want to resettle on the continent, and we are looking for means and way to for peaceful coexistence with our siblings here. And how do we plan to do this? We are doing it by empowering youths, both on our side of the Atlantic and youths here through digital projects, digital farms with an emphasis on corn, and to use some of those corn to set up manufacturing plant for animal feed, and with an emphasis on boiler chicken, and do an industrial boiler chicken project here, as we have done successfully in Jamaica. And in collaboration with companies here like Kantanka, who are making good industrial equipment, but are not being utilized on the continent. So we are here to change that. And so we are coming home to set up also a formal community for us as Caribbean people and people from Latin America. Others are welcome, but I stand for us. Okay, and that's my contribution. We also will be doing health project with emphasis on mental health. We already registered here in Ghana for that. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you to my brother here and Kwabnasa. I would have a panelist respond maybe a minute each if there's anything that you want to try and address. We have less than 8 minutes to end, and I hope that we can take a few more contributions before we end.
Okay. I just wanted to quickly address what you were saying. What you're describing is not a state of being African. What you are describing is capitalism, right? So what you are witnessing is the result of people competing for our resources. The greed that you are seeing, I am African, I am not greedy. I hope I'm not. You know what I'm saying? So we have to make that sort of discernment, because to label it as an African thing is to feed into what Hegel and all of them were saying about us, right? But with regards to what Yao was saying, the issue of the diversity situation, I was smiling when Na was talking about Nalubale. That's actually my language. And it's something that I've always thought about as well, because even when you talk about removing the name of Lake Victoria, my people, the Baganda, we were not the only people living on that lake. So it is Nalubale to me, but it's not Nalubale to everyone, right? And so it brought me to a conversation. Anyone who knows me knows I always raise this thing, where I talk about how our greetings in my language are so extensive and capture our entire, so much about our culture and our identities within that, right? And so for me, I agree that we should not be working towards erasure, but Pan-Africanism is not erasure. Pan-Africanism has room for all of that. And what I see in that is looking at how we look at our points of alignment and building pillars on that. And so, for example, looking at it in very practical situations, one of the things we are doing, and people like Cooperation Africa and various other groups are doing, is building cooperatives. When you're looking at cooperatives, you're looking at people's realities, their material realities, their needs and all of that, points of alignment within those spaces, out of which you can start to build. If you have that rooted in the desire for the betterment of the African being and the African continent, then it is a Pan-African work. So I think the question of diversity is important. The point of Pan-Africanism is not to erase our identities. It is to protect us. It is the unity in our diversity. And so I think that's a very beautiful part about being African, that diversity. But I am a Muganda, yes, and I am a Pan-Africanist. I am African, which is why I say I'm an African with roots in Uganda. I can identify with a location while still being a part of the whole.
Thank you very much. I come to Na because there was a specific one directed at you. I want to hear you.
Yes, yeah, sorry. You'll be surprised at how much material is out there and attempts that people have made in constructing at least nursery rhymes. Right? You'll be surprised. Some years ago, my brother here, Nia Nyete, invited me a meeting of the Revolutionary Party, and this issue came up and we're presented with samples that have been there for a very long time. So I'm very happy to engage in an educational revolution. So yeah, if you are ready, let's roll. Yeah, thank you. And then of course, I think Namata has addressed our brother here. All I have to say about that is be very careful about some historical writings and claims, because they do not really enlighten, but they rather benight us, and that should be it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Thiam wanted to make a very quick point. Apparently, we have more time than I thought, so forgive me. We'll take Dr. Thiam, and then we'll come back for some more contribution.
Thank you very much. Two very quick points. Pan-Africanism equivalent of return to the and often we take one for the other. There's a wall of saying that the king's sauce, king's dinner, the sauce of the king's dinner is made with their tears of the poor people. Is another wall of saying that the king is not your parent. So when we talk about greed, let's think really carefully about what we're saying, because internally we have made we have traditionally critiqued the power system that have oppressed us even within us. So that's really important. And that's not necessarily linked to the West or Europe or anything. These are internal critiques that we make. That said, also, I used earlier the term a black way of being white. Often, Pan-Africanists copy Western understandings of the nation state and just apply it to Africa. In our cultures and societies and socio-political organization, unity never meant the absence of difference. Take the Malian Empire. Senegal, part of Senegal, Guinea, Gambia, part of Mauritania, part of Mali. All of that were part of the Malian Empire. Founded not on the unity understood in the 18th century European understanding of the nation, but here on equivalences and the celebration of difference. It's the West that decided that to create a nation, you have one language. And then they literally killed their other languages. When we tried to do that, we saw what happened in some African countries. So no, absolutely not. It's not lazy, as my brother has mentioned, to talk about pluriversality, because it's not the contrary, of unity. That's Hegel. You can't be A and not A in the same space and none in the same time. The principle of contradiction, non-contradiction. You're 18th century European scholarship. For us, yes, you can. You are many things at the same time. That's fundamentally being African.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thiam. We'll go back and get some more comments.
Yeah, I'm Hasia Chawubakar from the Institute here. And
if you could point it directly like that.
Yes. So I think Dr. Thiam has just taken the seal out of my mouth on the issue of language. and talking about what do we want for us, and talking about issue of identity and language, talking about even what we are taught and the training that we get. We ask ourselves, what are we taught in? And the education system, what at all? What is the medium through which we are educated? So as Africans, and talking about Pan-Africanism, I think one very essential thing is a Pan-African language, a language that we find as our own. So as we sit here, I wouldn't even be speaking in English in one way or the other. We could have had a language that we identify ourselves in, and we communicate in that. When you go to school in Ghana, for instance, you can have an A or a 1 in a Ghanaian language. You get a D in English or E, and you are not going to get any entry into any tertiary institution. Is English my language? That is what I'm taught in, and I'm not good at it. I'm best in what is mine, and yet I get refused the opportunity to even progress. So we can't talk about Pan-Africanism when we don't bring in the issue of language. I think that is one thing that, if you are taking up the fight, right, you said educational revolution or something, that is one area I think is very essential for us to keep in the debate as we keep talking of the way forward. Thank you.
Okay, so I think there was yeah, in the middle there, yes.
Yes, my name is Nana Jumo. I'm with my comment is that when we talk about Pan-Africanism, it's an identity. And I think that is one of the reasons why we are not getting the grassroots embracing the concept of Pan-Africanism, because they don't understand what Pan-Africanism means. There are many people in this room, but if I should ask everybody who or where are you from, I think the answer I may get is, I'm a Ghanaian, I'm a Cameroonian, I'm a Ugandan. Not many people will say I'm an African. But then the problem is that even if you say you were a Ghanaian, somebody can still ask you, which part of Ghana are you from? Then you will go ahead and say, oh, I'm an Ewe. And then they will ask you, which part of Ewe? And then you say, oh, I'm Anlo. And they will ask you, which house in Anlo? So the bottom line is that if they want to define who you are, they can break you down to the minute roots of your identity. But if you want to be part of a bigger family, that is when you say, I am an African. And that is the concept of Pan-Africanism. That means you belong to that bigger family. When we talk about the African Union, and then we say they are not doing so well for Pan-Africanism and all of that, it is because fundamentally we ourselves don't even understand who we are. In concluding what I want to say, we talk about nepotism. And nepotism is defined as giving opportunities to your brother because you and the person are from the same family, the same clan, the same whatever. It means that if we are even to bring nepotism to being a Pan-African, that means in nepotism, you can be an African and give opportunities to your African brothers, no matter which part of Africa they will come from or which part of the diaspora they will be, because you are acknowledging that you and them are one, and that is the spirit of Ubuntu. So if you want to understand Pan-Africanism, then we can break it down from family, from tribe, from nationalism, Pan-Africanism, and then we go to globalization. So let's take at Pan-Africanism and understand it from identity. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take, okay, the next person right there, and then we'll come to on the right side there, yeah.
Yes, my name is Kemi Waliolait. I'm from AUCC also. Let me quickly work with my brother here, corroborate what he has said, and take us to how we can get this thing done, looking at our current realities. As Africans, how do we bring up our children? We communicate. How do we educate our children? We communicate. We teach them the little things. We start from the lowest and the things around them, and we build on that. We need to go back to do that. One of the panelists earlier on talked about embracing both the old and the current and bringing them together. We cannot run away from the fact that we have been brought up this way and we are who we are today. We cannot run away from that. But how can we bring those things that we have acquired, how can we put them together for our future? That is where we need to go. And looking at doing that, I think we need to focus on the young ones, the youths. And you can see today, as academics, there are theories. For example, the post-colonial discourse, the postmodernist theory. It's about bringing the little things together and focusing on those little things and building on them. Gone are the days when, we look at the big things. And our youths are doing it today, and they are doing it well. You can see that in a short while, they will conquer the world. Let me give an example. I'm a Nigerian, and you can see that today, Nigerian music, or Afro music, is taking over the world. If I start singing, oh, lo, 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 buga, when everybody will join me today, there are so many aspects like that. Why don't we go back home and do what we know how to do best as Africans? Train our children. Talk to ourselves in our families. And we're developing something like that. Something big is coming. May I go back to introduce this young man beside me that just talked? He's the president of the African Chamber of Content Creators. That chamber, with a few of us, there is something that is coming, something big, based on the Ubuntu that we want to introduce, and we believe that is something that can take Africa by the storm. But every one of us as individuals, let's retrospect. Universality, like Dr. Sheikh talked on earlier on, is real. It's what we need to write on, because we are diverse. But in that diversity, we can build something strong, something that can unite us, that can bring us back together as well. We cannot have one language. It's not possible. But we can have communication, what we call Pan-African communication. That is real. That is what we need to think about. Thank you very much.
Very well, thank you.
Yes, so there's a question online to the panelists. The person wants to know, what does a united Africa look like? So that's the question.
What does a united Africa look like? Thank you. I'll take one more comment from here, and then we'll come back to the panelists for their engagement once again. Yeah.
Rashidi, undergrad student from the Department of History. So, as my mom said, the identity, or how to identify ourselves with Pan-Africanism, should start from the basis. Mostly we realize that for one to know more about Pan-Africanism or understand what Pan-Africanism is when we get to the tertiary institution, which is very bad. So the youth are the little ones that are coming. They don't know what Pan-Africanism means until they get to the tertiary. You realize that in tertiary even, it's only few people who find themselves in certain departments that do understand what Pan-Africanism means. You ask our colleagues from different departments, let's say the science-related ones, and they'll be like, they don't know what Pan-Africanism really means, unless you come to the history department, the philosophy, and others that are related to such topic. And also, Pan-Africanism has become issue in Africa because we as Africans, we are refusing to realize that we have developed the teeth to break bones, and we are still depending on liquid. Therefore, allowing people to think for us or spoon-feed us, whereby we have the hands to spoon-feed ourselves. This is because the idea of Pan-Africanism that was being enacted or that was brought up by our forefathers, Dr. Osagyefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, is being frowned upon by other Africans. They are not ready to make the young ones or the youth know what the idea, the ideology is. And I think it's time to let the youth, the little ones, know what Pan-Africanism means from the basis, from the junior high school and the senior high school level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to very quickly take the remarks and engagement from the panelists once again. I don't know who would like to start because there are various issues there now.
Okay, I'll attempt to address the question that came from online about what a united Africa. That's a very big question. It's a very big question and it will have multiple answers. But I think I'll tackle just two to do with natural resources. And bear in mind, any African leader who has tried to tinker with the Western arrangement of natural resources in Africa has been deposed or killed. But why should Ghana and South Africa, I believe these are the two dominant gold producers, right, on the continent. Why should we be competing over who we sell our gold to and how much we sell it? And why should we take prices of something in our land, okay, prices determined by somebody else? Now, on the other hand, cocoa, was it this morning I heard that some minister of Agric, right, who was saying that Burkina Faso and Togo do not produce cocoa, and yet they are exporting cocoa. It means they are smuggling Ghana's cocoa. Now, a long time ago, wise people advised us that let's harmonize these products, bring them together under one continental body. Now, that strengthens you, it puts you in a position to determine the prices for what you produce. But here we are. So that's an answer for what a united Africa looks like. An Africa that sees gold, cocoa, other natural resources as African. And the determination of its price and its sale, and if we're going to industrialize and so on and so forth, it's taken from an African perspective, one that has the interests of the wider continent, right, at hand, and not what we are currently doing in our fragmented states and competing with each other and creating a mess. Thank you.
Yeah, I would have Dr. Rachel also make a point based on what we have heard so far.
So when I heard that question, I got a little bit sad because the question was, what does a united Africa look like? And my answer in my head was, I don't know. I've never seen it. I've never experienced it. I can't tell you. But what I think would be important for that is one unified goal for all of us as Africans, one identity as all of us, for all of us as Africans, not necessarily diasporans and people from the continent, but African. I am African. And also, I think prioritizing each other above everyone else, ensuring that we are helping each other in terms of business, in terms of school, an African passport. That to me would be a unified Africa for all Africans, including us from the Caribbean. So little things like that are what I'm thinking about.
And I would stay on the same question with Dr. Thiamen Namata, and of course you can also add anything that you want, because at the end of the day, the question always comes down to this: what exactly does this look like?
Okay. I first want to touch on the fact that we are dynamic beings, so whatever we frame it as can change, it can evolve, it can become what it needs to become in each and every moment. And I think it's very important that we recognize that, because if we get stuck on what it looks like and because we haven't perfectly framed it, we don't go there, then we will always be here. But on a very pragmatic level, Kwame Nkrumah actually pointed out the basic things that a united Africa would need. I have them here because I sometimes forget some. So, common African citizenship, as you spoke about. This is, an obvious thing. How hard is it to travel as an African on this continent and you watch people from outside just gallivanting to be honest, across our land, right? One federal government, 54 states, central defense system. It makes sense. When you're looking at the situation right now happening with the French wanting to now intervene in West Africa, it makes sense. One central bank, so that we don't also have our brothers and sisters with their reserves in European countries. One currency, one foreign policy, an African common market. So these are very basic, pragmatic things that point to one thing, which is what we've been saying the whole time. How do we ensure that the African is at the center? We have been marginalized or alienated, to use the term you've been using, all this time. So a united Africa is essentially an Africa in which we are at center, like you were saying. Thank you.
Dr. Thiam.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure. I have absolutely no idea what that would look like. But what I know is a political organization should be based on the ways in which we define being. Sorry to talk about the West all the time, but if you look at the history of the West, there is a moment in history that's called modernity when somebody woke up and said, I think, therefore I am. And that was the birth of the subject. Because of the birth of the subject, they created democracies. So I think the fundamental question that we should ask is, what is, as you said earlier, I think you referenced it a little bit, at least you implied it. How do we understanding being on the continent? And that being, as you said, is fundamentally fluid, becoming. And therefore, try to imagine a socio-political organization that is directly related to the way in which we understand ontology. Framing, thinking, will determine what we think. For example, right, my sister, as you talked about African languages, on the one hand I agree, and on the other I kind of disagree. African languages, yes, of course. Thinking, we dwell in language, so we think with language, right? But why one African language here? How about creating a space where everybody here speaks so many languages that we can each speak in our own and get understood? What is interesting on the continent is, I'm not sure about here, but if you go to Senegal, the older you are, the more languages you speak. It is very rare to see a Senegalese person who's 80 plus and who doesn't speak several indigenous languages. That's who we are. You know, so I always have an issue when we start thinking of a Pan-African language. And we start trying to create an African version of the West. What I'm going to say is not very popular here, will not be popular here. If I have been speaking a language for 300 and 400 years, that language is mine. If that language starts to have a direct effect on the ways in which I define the self, that language is mine. I did a talk in Dakar a couple of months ago, and one student asked me the same question. Let's drop French and use our African languages, And I said this, look, how do you say I love you in Wolof? He's like, oh, no. Like the truth is, you don't say to your partner in Wolof, I love you. Because the idea of the marriage itself is rooted on something fundamentally different. The truth is today in Senegal, you meet one person, you fall in love with them, you marry them. So there is something that is very modern there that has changed and that has become us. So the truth is our history has unfolded in such a way that being African is what we are today. I will not let my parents choose my partner anymore. My parents' generation did. Why am I saying all of this? So when I say I love you to my partner, I will tell them I love you in French. I can't say it in Wolof, and that is who I have become. So that French language has become mine. That does not mean, that is a problem only if we are rooted in a Eurocentric world when speaking French means negating our African languages. And if you've heard me speak for the past hour or so, you always see that I often go back to my own language. I speak it very well. My kids who were born in the West speak their language. My first language is Wolof. However, the language that I've spoken for 400 years, that my parents have spoken, has become part of me. Everything starts somewhere. And the idea of, my brothers here also talked about presenting ourselves as African. I am African. Yes, why not? But why not? I am so many different things. Because that also, let's engage as African in this Pan-African thing. So instead of trying to define essentially what an African is, let's be African in the sense that what we do is what can Pan-Africanism do? Rather than what is Pan-Africanism. That, I think, will allow us to be African sometimes, African Wolof sometimes. And the moment that we will be really Pan-African is when I see something, an Ewe, and say, that's a brother. You don't need to say an African, because Pan-African can also be essentialist. Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. And because the language question is so important and very integral to all of what we are talking about, I see that Dr. Hasiatu wants to make a point, especially on the language bit. So I'll take that. Yes.
Yeah, so I don't want to be misconceived or misunderstood. We have about more than 2,000 languages in Africa. And that is not a disadvantage. That indeed is a great advantage and a very great and rich resource, because that is our identity. Multilingualism is, I don't even know how to rate it. It's a very, very important instrument that still puts in together like national cohesion, everything. What I am trying to say is that I want to be understood everywhere I go. If I'm in South Africa, I want to be able to speak the language that is there. If I'm in where Swahili is spoken, I want to be able to express myself in whatever language is spoken there. Wherever I am, I want to be identified as the African I want to be, like I want to be. So this is more of a fantasy, if I may put it in that way. That why don't we, let's say Swahili, for instance, is widely across, right? And is a language that is gaining root almost everywhere. Can we make Swahili an African or Pan-African language? That is what I'm trying to say. So if I'm a child in Ghana and I'm going to school, I am very happy to learn all my Ghanaian languages. And I want to communicate in an African language. As we speak here in this forum, I want to speak in an African language. If I speak in Akan and you all understand me, I'm very happy. If I speak in Swahili and all of you understand me, I'm very happy. Why am I talking about colonialism and using the colonial master's language in one way or the other? So it is a big fantasy. I'm not saying it's something we can achieve today or tomorrow, but I'm just trying to say, can we even think of something like that? Yeah. But having an individual, I speak about 4 or 5 Ghanaian languages, and I'm very happy to do that. If I go to Nigeria, I can speak Hausa. If I go to wherever Hausa is spoken, I can speak that. But I want to learn Swahili. Yeah. I want to be able to communicate when I get to that environment. Yeah. So my point in, is it possible for us to even think of something like that? I don't want to be in school, get 1 in my language, get 3 or 4 in English or something, and I'm denied the opportunity to go to the university. Why should that be the case? So that basically is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you very much. I see Namata wants to make a quick point, and then we'll take, we have just about 7 minutes to go. And so I take Namata, and then I'll go back there to the gentleman out there. There are 2 people out there. Okay, great.
I was just saying that I think that maybe part of our, the back and forth that we're having on language is perhaps rooted in our historical relationship with languages being brought in. You know what I'm saying? In that, in the past, when they brought English, they told us don't speak your language at home. Whereas, like you were saying, we're not saying erase one and then only speak the other. You know, like it's an inclusive sort of situation. And I just find it really interesting, because I realized when you look at colonial office documents, when they're looking at how they were looking about structuring their systems on our land, one of the complaints that they had was that we spoke too many languages. And the reason that they said that was simply because it was harder for them to control us, that's all, right? And so that erasure of, you go to schools and it's speak English always, it was specifically to that power. It was not necessarily about or, anything else, or, it was literally just for them to take control. So maybe part of what our back and forth is right now is that we're responding from a place of trauma. We're saying, oh, if I speak another language, you're telling me to erase mine. When I see it as something as the more the better, like you were saying. People are speaking a number of languages, and I'm very bad with languages, but I would love to be able to speak wherever I go.
Yeah.
Very quickly, right? What about the beauty of not understanding each other? The promise of transparency is a very simplistic European thing. Opacity, not understanding very well, and trying still to communicate and respect the difference. I think that's what's African, seriously. That also is something that we need to engage with,
Yeah, but also I guess in all of this, the question that one might also ask is, where does translation, for instance, also play a role in here, as the Venerable Ngugi wa Thiong'o, for instance, has also advocated for a very long time. There's a question online, but I've already given an indication to 2 people out there. Yeah, and now I'm getting more hands. I don't know how. We have 5 minutes. Unfortunately, we cannot do beyond that. But the gentleman in the red and white stripes. Okay, great.
Thank you for this program. My name is Esther. I'm a past student of University of Ghana. Revolution, Pan-Africanism in 21st century countries. When we want to talk about Africa as a whole, we need to identify ourselves by, as our doctor have just said, by language. And in addition to that too, Africans can also develop their continents to suit that of that 20th century countries like US, Canada, and other countries. Like our panel was saying about our minerals that we are having in the country, and all the resources we are having in this country can be generating a lot of things that can help everybody in the whole Africa. That everybody can also find Africa as a country or a land flowing with honey, and we will not be running here and there to go to any other place and then undermine our country language and even our color and everything that we have. Africans are having talent and a lot of things within them. But as we are now in this country, a lot has been seen because our leaders are there. Anything that we want to do here, we have to ask the whites to come. Let's say petrol, let's say gold, let's say timber. Everything they have to come and do it before we will get the resource out of it. To unite as Africans is to be each other's helper and love each other. Wherever we meet ourselves, we should show the integrity that we love our country and we really want to be a Pan-Africanism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I'll take that. And then we'll try and...
Hello.
Yeah.
My name is Desmond. So I also want to draw attention to a facet of Pan-Africanism. I think we have to be very radical in our approach, because when we look at Pan-Africanism, it's more of empowering the Africans, taking ownership. And then when we take ownership, what it means is that whoever is coming for our resources wouldn't be having them cheaper like they get it as at now. So that means we'll face a force of objection. You know, it wouldn't be easy. If we think Pan-Africanism will be easy like we are doing, we have a discourse and all those things, it wouldn't be easy. There's also a force fighting against Pan-Africanism. And then they are intentional in their approach. So we also have to be very intentional in our approach. And then in a way that it wouldn't be, how do I call it? It wouldn't be obvious, because when it's obvious, then they know how we are trying to liberate ourselves. But then when they don't know how the force is coming, then it will take them by surprise. Before they realize, then we are already being liberated. Because when I'll make a reference to the Bible.
Yeah. Would you yeah.
I'll
do
make
that and kindly, quickly.
Okay, so I'll make a reference to the Bible. When we look at Daniel, the Babylon structure, the kingdoms.
Yes.
You know, whichever force that broke down the kingdoms wasn't part of the system. The stone came out of nowhere, and then it destroys that power. So I believe if we will win the war as Pan-Africans, we have to disguise our approach.
Very well.
How we are. But the summary is that is a
very
war.
Quickly, very quickly. Thank you very much. Yes. Lessons from the Bible on how to fight Pan-African war.
Before Professor A.C. Sutherland speaks, there is a question online. Hello everyone, my name is Mahmoud, and I spoke about Africans being greedy, but my point seems to be misunderstood because I couldn't finish my submission because of time, or probably my speech wasn't more clear. What I meant is that as a Pan-Africanist or Pan-Africans, we should do more of the educational revolution, as my brother Eric Nah said. We should educate ourselves more on love for each other and the greater good than personal gains, like how Kwame Nkrumah was doing it, by spending Ghana's resources to aid the independence of our African brothers. Basically, what I mean is for Pan-Africanism to take hold, we must educate ourselves to love each other more, rather a few politicians amassing wealth at the expense of all Africans. Thank you.
Thank you for the rejoinder.
Thank you very much. My name is A.C. Sutherland Addy. I just want to say this. This conversation has started many times over. What I would like to encourage is that we are not afraid to continue talking to each other. And it's very important to talk and to converse and to communicate. For those who are saying that we talk too much, we haven't been talking enough. We haven't been talking to each other enough. We should get into different spaces, whether we're in business or whatever spaces we are, and make Pan-Africanism a cross-cutting issue in everything that we do and talk about. So that's one. The second point I want to quickly make is that we are being dictated to in the area of technology, so that even though it's all available to us, we have to interrogate what we are using it for. Because if we're getting on there and twerking and so on, that's not, the way to use this technology. What I often ask is, when you go on trying to, for example, go on your computer and your name is wrong, it comes up with a red line underneath it. There's something that we are not inputting into there to make sure that we are recognized. Look at all the memes and all of that. What color are they and so on. That's the work that we need to make in order for us to be part of the global technology. It's something that it's ideas that are turned into reality. So as for thinking, it has to be done. But I'm just asking that we don't think that there is, because there's something global that we have to belong to. We have to create a global presence. And that's what Pan-Africanism for me is about. One of the things anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to really apologize.
So, moderator, if I may,
yes.
The conversation will continue in the various workshops we have in the course of the day. There will be session for workshops which are broken into various themes. When you go through the program, you see those themes: AU and Agenda 2063, Africa in a Diaspora, Women, Gender and Pan-Africanism, AFCFTA and Regional Integration, Reparations and Repatriation. Yeah, so these are the various themes that the workshop will cover, and then we can continue having the conversations there. So,
thank you very much. And unfortunately, I'm unable to. Please forgive me. I should take a last one. Because I know that both of them had their hands up long ago. Yeah, so thank you for helping me out.
Okay, so my name is Agasaro Keza, and I am a Rwandan woman. And as a daughter of post-genocide Rwanda, I feel like a lot of pain and disruption has informed my politics. And as we think about Pan-Africanism and all this politics of dreaming and hoping about Black joy, my question becomes, where do we have room at the table to nurse all these histories of pain of our generation, of the generations that came before us, as we dream and all the work that it takes to dream and the labor that it takes to theorize? Do we have room at the table to nurse history's past wounds?
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I'm happy that you got a chance to take that. Thank you. So at this point, what we're going to do now, because we are already past the time that we have, is to grant the panelists one more opportunity. In less than a minute, I would hope that you make your concluding remarks. We'll start with Namata.
I always tell people architecture brought me to socialism, to activism, to Pan-Africanism, because it was my lived reality that made me understand the need for us to unite. And so I think when we talk about everything that we are doing and all of those things, we also have to understand that we have to be able to impact the spaces in which we are working. And I love what we've been talking about. And I was just thinking as we were talking, things like, for example, the fact that if we're saying we're creating Pan-African languages and things like that, we have to be able to also create the foundations at policy level. We have to be able to impact the spaces in which these things are decided. And so I just want us as Pan-Africanists to recommit ourselves to being engaged at that level, at targeting, at making spaces of healing, at making spaces in which we are able to unite in a manner that brings that theory that we have been creating and all that material and all that information that is generated, that is beautiful, these beautiful pillars, so that we can actually build that future. And it can happen, and in our lifetimes. I believe that. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Namata. Dr. Thiam.
Thank you, everybody. It's an extreme joy to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you all here. All I can say is, last words, let's take Africa seriously and delink. Thinking from a Pan-African perspective is a very slippery space because of the pervasiveness of white supremacy. As we engage with Africa and African futures and Pan-African futures, it is essential that we think from an African perspective or from African perspectives and avoid into creating what I love to call, everybody who's heard me speak has heard me use this, a black way of being white.
Thank you very much. Dr. Rachel.
Thank you. So I don't just talk about it, I actually am about it. And in the spirit of women's empowerment and youth, I want to give the rest of my minute to this lady in the pink.
Thank you so much. I'm Jemima from Delmark. I'm a student, and thank you once more. So my question was for Namata. Yeah, you discussed earlier about the fear that we have developed, the fear in us. So, like, how can we break loose? Because as a research student, I've observed so many people that have discussed with interviews that they have this fear in them. They can't express themselves. How can we break loose and fight this fear? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I'm truly happy that you had the opportunity also. And Eric.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I'm also very happy for the turnout and everything. I'll end on two key points. One by Amilcar Cabral, that in our quest to decolonize, we need to return to the source. Return to the source. Dr. Adam Adote, I don't know if he says Sankofa. But then, while we return to the source, let's also be guided by some words I read from Kwame Jechi when I was a philosophy student, that a return to the past must be guided by critical examination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Tay Kumado and V. Brown, Dr. Sheikh Thiam, and Namata Sarumaga Musisi. My name is Abdul Karim Ibrahim. Thank you very much to all of you. And because someone raised the issue of Afrobeat, and today we're talking about Pan-Africanism, and because I see a lot of young people here, this is how I ended. This has been another banger. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you very much, moderator. Thank you, panelists. We would like you to remain in your seats. We have a small presentation for the panel. And we would, at this moment, invite Dr. Edwin Ajay and Dr. Hasia to do the presentations on our behalf. Thank you. So we would first invite Namata to... All right, thank you. Dr. Thiam. Please, let's show them some love. Let's show them some love. This was very engaging and insightful. Let's show them some love. Dr. Brown. Then finally, Tay Kumado. All right, so we have a few announcements. Panelists, please still stay in your seats. We have a few announcements. What we have to do next is to go down the hall, into the hallway for the launching of an exhibition. But before we do that, we would want to first give a small background to what the exhibition is about, and then also give the next steps for our activities. So, Nanekuya.
So we are going to have two exhibitions. One, Umoja, Africa Must Unite Now, and the other, When Women Speak. It's been exhibited here at the Institute of African Studies before, but this is another opportunity to see the exhibition again and to have a more critical look and critical perspective. So let's all go down with our good eyes and good minds and then open and then see some good stuff, good exhibition. Then after that, we are going to move from there, from the exhibition, we are going to go to the pagoda for lunch. I know you've been sitting here for a while, so some of you may be hungry. So we're going to have lunch, and then in the lunch, we have vegan and vegetarian options. We also have, the normal dishes. So if you are vegan or you are vegetarian, please go to that side. It's very limited. So then the rest of us will go to...
Let's kindly hold on. We will have a very good procession out, led by our acting director of the Institute, together with the panelists, so then we can follow them to the exhibition. Please, let's kindly wait for them to take the lead, then we can follow. Yes, so there will be good food. Everybody will be well catered for. Whatever you want, you would get. If you don't get it, come and ask me. Yes, and then later in the evening, that will be after our workshops, we have a very captivating activity called or dubbed the Palm Wine Night, where there will be drinking and merrymaking, but then education as well, because we are going to now practicalize all that we've heard here. There will be poetry, there will be good music, there will be drinks, palm wine, and those of us who are not interested in alcohol, there is Sobolo, there is Lamuji, there are so many things. Whatever you want, if you don't get it, ask me. All right? I will provide it for you, whatever you want. If you don't get it, find me and ask me. Yes, but then again, take note of the various themes on the workshops, because after lunch, we would reconvene here and then break into the workshops. So let's do well to take note of which particular ones we want to be part of, and then know how we can have a conversation about that when we get to our various rooms. So Dr. Osman Al-Hassan, please. Yes, we also want to thank our online participants for staying with us. We are going to have lunch. Unfortunately, you are not here with us, but do well to have lunch wherever you are, and let's reconvene when we get back into the room. Yes, so thank you. Continue spreading the word, hashtag Pan-African Conversations. This is the first moving along the shores of the African continent. So let's do well. Yes, to patronize. We thank our sponsors, Institute of African Studies, ASAA, and then we thank them very much. So Dr. Osman Al-Hassan, please, we can move gently to open the exhibition. Yes, let's give it up to them and then join them as they go, as they move out. So we can join them so that they lead us to the exhibition. When we go out of the building, there are nice things we will see. You can patronize them. Ubuntu GH is in the house. Yes, she has a lot of artifacts and beautiful clothing. You can patronize her. Yes, so online participants, thank you very much. We will have lunch on your behalf. Yes, and we will be back. So let's enjoy.